Good morning. I am Kimberly McQuarrie, and I am the Director of Community Programming and the Co-Director of the Innovation Labs at the Dali Museum. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this live presentation and those who are joining us via our live stream on YouTube. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of inviting the incomparable Peter Tush, my colleague, Senior Curator of Education, for a reprisal of his talk on Dali's holiday cards in honor of the arrival of the holiday season today, December 1st. Too soon for me. Not ready. Back up. But before we get to the talk, we always want to thank those who make events like this possible, and that includes the City of St. Petersburg for their continued sponsorship of this and other series at the museum. And of course, a special thanks to all of our members who make events like this possible for all of us. Remember to visit our website at thedali.org for more information on programs like these and many others. Giving you just a little view ahead of our December lineup. Today, actually this evening, we have our Dali Dozen event, which is a lot of fun. Tomorrow, we have Film Club, where we'll be having one of our this is the penultimate in the Boundary Breaking Women Film Club series, and we'll be going over Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story. And then 12/9, we're having a very special event where we're going to celebrate our wish tree. We have a beautiful book that has been published with all of the wishes that people have put on our wish tree over the years. And we think that this time of year is an especially poignant one to celebrate the idea of wishes, hopes, dreams for the future. And so I hope you'll all join us that day. We'll have music, a lot of celebration, and of course, reading of our wishes. And then on 12/12, we have our fashion design runway event. If you've never seen the amazing creations that these young designers put together, I highly recommend that you check it out. Really amazing designs by these young high school students, but they don't seem that way when you see what they put together. Super talented. And then we're going to be having an ornament making workshop on the 16th. So if you're into arts and crafts, be sure to join us then. And then finally, we're going to round out the month on the 23rd with our video podcast, Follow the Tangent, where we're going to be reprising a series with Allison McCarthy, an assistant curator here, where she's going to talk about how exhibits come to life, and we're going to be digging into the design phase. So lots of really cool things coming up. And as usual, please follow us also on social media. We're at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, for the latest Dali Museum happenings and Dali-inspired conversations, and be sure to share your own thoughts. You can always do that on any of those platforms, #TheDali. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Peter. As the Senior Curator of Education here at the Dali Museum, he has been in this museum's life for decades, and we're the better for it. His work touches almost every area of the museum, as he is the key interpreter of the collection and special exhibitions. He trains our docents, scripts our audio guides, directs our school programming, and works with the curatorial team to develop special exhibits. Over the years, he's been a fixture of the Coffee with a Curator program, presenting myriad talks on a wide range of subjects, from women in surrealism to Dali's interest in ghosts. Today, he's presenting for us Dali for the Holidays, Christmas cards, plus 2 Catalan traditions, where he's going to share Dali's stretch into commercial card design, with his own surreal twist, of course, as well as teach us a little bit about Catalan holiday traditions. Please join me in welcoming Peter Tush.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for coming today. This is a talk that I am reprising. I did it last year, and people enjoyed it so much it seemed maybe this will be a tradition going forward in celebrating the holiday here at the Dali. Dali has a very interesting and unique sort of connection to the holidays, as you'll discover through the course of this talk. And Catalonia itself has some unusual ways of celebrating, which I think are very important and appropriate to share at this time, when looking at Dali and trying to situate his take on the holidays with the bigger Catalan traditions. So hopefully you will enjoy this. We're going to start with just a very brief overview of some ideas of Dali connected to the holiday. The first is indeed this really wonderfully shabby costume that Dali seems to be wearing here, where the mustache is prominently featured as part of Papa Noel's characteristics. And I think that this was done for 1965 signing at Doubleday Bookstore in New York City. Dali had just published Diary of a Genius, and this is him with a vat of caviar, I don't know if you can see that over here, that he would enjoy in between each book as he was signing them, but really disheveled, not really putting his heart into trying to be a Santa for the holidays. And that leads us to this question about the holidays as a commercial opportunity. And certainly Dali was very poised to embrace commercialism as part of the holiday tradition. So, for example, during the 1940s, when Dali found himself exiled here in the United States, he became really comfortable working with a variety of different approaches to commercial advertising and merchandising. And it included everything from unique creations in jewelry, which was a rarity for artists, to working with Elsa Schiaparelli on the lobster dress, doing society portraits for hire, and even designing things like Vogue magazine covers. So he became really much more involved in these kind of projects than oil painting while he was here in the United States for those 8 years. There's a great quote. Dali says that as a Renaissance man, I do not consider myself separate from the masses because I'm an artist. I'm ready to design whatever people want. And I think that's the whole aesthetic here. That's the backbone of what leads to this conversation about Dali and commercial holiday cards. In 1948, Dali made what seems to be his first foray into the holiday commercially. This is a cover for Vogue magazine from 1948. It was Christmas themed. You can see the two lovely Christmas trees here with their stars shining. And it was inspired by a detail from Leonardo da Vinci drawing, the Adoration of the Magi. And you can see here in the background, there's an architectural feature. It's a broken bridge, and the two trees are growing out of it. So that was what Dali was thinking about. And then we can see here the work that Dali did, and then how it was just simply incorporated into the Vogue magazine cover. And it was in 1946. The cover is Dali, double Dali, read the caption. A Christmas scene in which can be seen in two ways. And readers were directed to take a peek at the page through to find the sleight of eye directions. So essentially what that meant is, it's like Mad Magazine, for those of you who grew up with Mad Magazine, folded over, and we suddenly have the face that you can see here. So Dali was very much in touch with his childhood self when he would do projects like this. He approached them with great enthusiasm and had a lot of fun with them, and definitely brought his approach to the holidays into fruition. The next year, Dali did a watercolor study of an angel in 1948, and that became used by Brian Hosiery ad. So you can see Brian's hosiery down here, and it was an ad for the holidays. And it seems like about a decade and a half later, in 1964, Dali returns to that, almost the same angel, and he creates an angel, a Christmas angel with horse, designed by Salvador Dali for benefiting UNICEF. In 1964, Dali designs, as one of 5 prints, he designs a Christmas tree in Washington Gate at New York City, part of a 1964 print suite. So this was the only one that had the Christmas theme, but he was certainly well attuned to the holiday. And a few years later, he does a Christmas greeting. This is a card that he sent to the Lucas family. They were supporters of his. Merry Xmas to Lucas for the holidays, 1967. In 1968, he creates this greeting card, which is called Père Noël. And in 1971, he uses this very simple design, which looks very much like the designs we'll be seeing for a Christmas card for UNICEF. And then just 2 final ones to throw in here before we move on. There are 2 cards that we have in our archive that have no information about manufacturers or who published them or even what year they were done. So I just wanted to share these. At some point, I assume we will identify them, but so far we haven't been able to figure out who they were done by. But there's an angel, and then there's also this very curious We Three Kings, which looks more like a 1940s illustration. And that brings us to the beginning of the story. So 1948, Hallmark Cards. Dali becomes part of a large group of artists who are approached by Hallmark to do a series of artist greeting cards for the holidays. And in 1948, they decided they wanted to do a kind of artist line that would include everyone from El Greco to Van Gogh to Picasso. The idea was simple: use greeting cards to share the great art masterpieces with millions who otherwise might be familiar with the artists. The one artist who really prospered during this period of time as a result of this is, of course, Norman Rockwell. His cards were embraced immediately, and here we are, 60 to 70 years later, and they're still embraced, republished, and everybody loves sharing them. So Norman Rockwell really was kind of, I guess, the ideal that Hallmark was looking for in this project. Dali got involved as well, but unfortunately did not succeed quite as well as some of the other artists. So in 1947, he designed this card and several others I'm going to show you, but they didn't sell well at all. So this is a really beautiful one. It's a Madonna and Child. It just seemed that the tone for some people just didn't seem to be the right card. A little stranger is the Three Wise Men from the Adoration. In particular, I don't know if you can see it, but this very curious, the curious humped camel, the grimace on his face is very, very strange. There's a really lovely one, but it's a totally Dalinian one, which you can see why it wouldn't connect, is the angel. And I don't know if you can see this, but the bridge in the background also becomes the instrument that this gentleman is playing, and her face is formed by the birds up in the sky, and she becomes part of also the landscape features. So it's a really kind of a fantastic reimagining of the core story, but did not connect. And here you can see the original study. And then there's my favorite one, which I don't know if this ever got used for a card, but it's Santa with drawers. So 1948, it doesn't seem like this even got to the position of being republished as a card, but it's it's totally terrifying on some level, and it seems really very different than any of the other cards I'm going to show you. This one really is Santa, which he's not present in the other ones. But it was picked up, I guess, in 2017 for the Times Literary Supplement for Who Invented Christmas. And I'm not sure if that exactly illustrates that idea or not, but I would love to get a card of this. Which brings us to 1959. So 1948, Dali enters into the project with the other artists. They're not sold very well. They don't do well, and another 10 years goes by. For some reason, Hallmark, becoming more aware of Dali's kind of flair in the advertising industry, they approach him again, despite the fact the first ones didn't sell. He signed on again in 1959 for a set of cards that were holiday themed. So not just Christmas, but also some other holidays. This time the cards included, as I said, Valentine's Day, Easter, and Mother's Day. And it's interesting, Dali said that basically for $15,000 in cash in advance, he would create 10 greeting cards, but he required no suggestions from Hallmark for the subject or medium, no deadline, and no royalties. So that's what you get for $15,000 with Dali, is some very clear sense that you have to have hands off. And he completed half of them in the morning at the St. Regis. So he just went back and, the 5 of them were done already. And they really are quite lovely. They aren't radically different from the ones I just showed you. There was this lovely one for the Nativity with Dali's signature at the bottom. Very loose, very much in keeping with his graphic style. There's this one, the Butterfly Madonna, where you can see the butterfly down here in relation to the Madonna and Child. There's this one, the Nativity. And there's one that sort of gives us a prelude to what's going to be in the next decade. This is the Christmas Tree of Butterflies from 1960. So this was also one of the set. And the tree, this is Dali's statement about it, which he was very conscious about the way he was putting these together. He said, the tree stands on the great bare Spanish plain, which represents, as it does in other paintings, timelessness and eternity. Surely Christmas is the essence of the timeless and the eternal. The two little figures below are my mother, indicating the tree with her butterfly scepter of spiritual beauty and love, and myself as a boy, delighting in having her show it to me. So definitely a wave of nostalgia seems to be involved with this process. So these were the first 4 cards. Here are some of the other ones. This includes an Easter card on the left-hand side. The Mystic Rose, I believe, would have been a Valentine's card. And the one in the middle, I'm not sure about. Here's 3 more. We've got an Easter card, a Mother's Day card, and a Valentine's card. The Valentine's is really lovely and pretty over the top, super saturated with color. And ultimately, Hallmark only produced 2 of these 10 cards, the nativity scene and the depiction of the Madonna and child. And even these did not go over well with the audience. It turned out that they didn't sell. There was a public outcry of disapproval of these cards for whatever reason. They were all pulled from the rack, and the few that were actually sold, the few hundred that were sold, have now become really high collectible items. So if you do have one of these in your possession, you may be you may have something of worth. But it's really surprising. Just Dali did not connect with an American audience with these commercial designs. So Hallmark said that Dali's take on Christmas was a bit too avant-garde for their average greeting card buyer. Negative public response soon convinced Hallmark to drop Dali's cards from their product line, making them very highly sought after as collector's items. And they really have been very reluctant to publish any of these again, even though we've approached them, and I believe Spain has approached them, but they have chosen not to do this, at least at the moment. And that brings us to the next part of the story, a much more robust story of Dali and Christmas cards. And it's a particular company in Spain, originally in Germany, or at least this is the Spanish subsidiary of Germany. It's a Hoechst Ibérica. And Hoechst is a company, pharmaceutical company, as I said, from Germany. They located one of their branches into Spain. And in 1953, they approached Dali to start making cards. And what he did is every year he would produce a card and they would share it with all of their constituents in the Spanish market. So that they started this project and they kept up with it for 2 decades. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. So there were a lot of cards that were produced between 1958 and 1976. They would send these to their customers, the doctors and the pharmacists throughout Spain. This is a Hoechst Ibérica, is now known as Sanofi Aventis. It's still consistently in this industry, and they still, I guess, celebrate this lineage of cards that they were able to have Dali produce for them. So some of the cards are Christmas themed, others reference medicinal plants, but they were all intended for a Christmas sharing of the story. And one of the recurring things that you'll see throughout all of these cards is the idea of metamorphosis, regeneration, like the chrysalis that blooms into the butterfly. You'll see that over and over again. Lots of butterflies. So really one of the most beautiful ones is the very first one from 1953. This is the Arbor de Noël Napoleon Christmas card. And you can see Dali has used the butterfly wings again as the source of the shape of the Christmas tree, simply inverting them and then crowning it at the top. The original Dali watercolor created for this card actually went up for auction in 2020, sold for 150,000 euros. So it is a watercolor drawing, but these are definitely seen as very valuable for the quality and also the illustrative ideas that Dali has. And what Dali did is with each of these cards, he actually wrote a little interpretation of what the basic illustration was. He didn't do it with the first card, but every other card, there's an interpretation. So we'll come across these. Let's see, this one goes along with the 1965 card. Over the world, open the hope of hibernation and anti-gravitation of the imminent future. And we'll see where that one applies. I should not have included that just yet. So this 1958, so 5 years passes, he does this card. This is called Wings, Christmas card, very much like the first one, but here we have angel wings forming the shape of the Christmas card. And Dali describes it as the wings of Nordic mythology settle on the Mediterranean Christmas tree, erecting erected in Spanish genealogy. So the interpretations are not always helpful, but they are certainly inspired. I think that's probably the most important thing to note. They are very fun. Here's one called The Sea, where you can see a nautilus shell suddenly gives birth to a piece of coral with fins that suggests about a Christmas tree. Dali's description, he says, the sea, source of life and continuous creationism, offers the new unexpected microcosm of a Christmas greeting. You know, probably a way that it's never been described before, but certainly Dalinian. There's this lovely one. This is Don Quixote as a Christmas tree. And Dali describes it as, faced with the offensive disintegration of materialism, Don Quixote rises in shrunken armor out of the Christmas tree. So somehow the Christmas tree metamorphosed into the great hero of Spanish mythology. This one, also very lovely, is the Infanta from 1961, where the Infanta Margarita is holding a Christmas tree made of bluebirds. And Dali says, the sumptuous Velasquez Infanta offers us this Christmas a unique tree, the bluebird of Christmas trees. So very inspired, very much in keeping with what he was doing at the moment, just riffing on the idea of Christmas trees. We move forward the next year and we are in the unknown. We have jumped into a different world altogether. This is the Astronautic Christmas of 1962, very Jules Verne kind of theme. Dali says, the flames of alchemy melt the lead into this painting, out of which the first astronautic Christmas arises, whose Christmas tree rises over the summits of ideal towers. And so he's starting to use collage as one of the elements, and who knows, this is probably Scientific American or Life magazine, but he's having a lot of fun with this. You can see there's just a little Christmas tree up here in the background poking out. And then we have the octopus from 1963, and if I'm correct, I think that's the year Dali did the mythology series, so it was probably in keeping with some of his ideas about mythology. But what's really lovely is each tentacle reaches up and has a little flame coming out of it, so it's kind of an, what do you call it? Oh my God. As soon as I do something that don't have written in front of me, I go blank. Well, Dali's description is, the atlas of the new subaquatic world raises the tentacles of possible Christmas fortunes. So there is a sense of bringing back things from underneath the sea. There's also, I don't know if you can see it, but this sort of like a little atlas who's on his shoulders is this octopus he's trying to raise into the heavens. And there are other curious figures, like this little religious figure who seems to just be strolling around in the background. This is a curious one. This one's just called Grid from 1964. And Dali describes it as, Christmas of 1964 is characterized by maximum visual illusions with optical hallucinatory effects that remind one of the moire before our eyes of our ancestors, and that in Dalinian style, peer out with amazement under the raised curtain of pop art. So just let that just seep over you, just take that in. You can see the two eyes peering out from behind the moire Christmas tree that Dali has created here. Very Bridget Riley kind of inspirations, but it's very, very fun and curious. And it's a little bit like the Mae West room in the Dali's own museum, where something transforms into a face. And here we have the one from 1965, Woman of the Drawers, or Daphne. Daphne, of course, transforming into a tree, and the tree at this time suggesting to Dali the Christmas tree. And he says, over the world opens the hope of hibernation and the anti-gravitation of the imminent future. So not quite as Christmassy as some of the others, but still he's locking in there. The next one goes back to the subaquatic world. This one is just called Coral from 1966. And here, it's not so much a Christmas tree, although it does seem very much like the octopus, but the theme is the vital organ of regeneration in nature. And Dali says, life blooms splendidly from the sea as a coral-like tree, on the branches of which stars, all men of goodwill, will make their nest, with a blue background of refulgent stars. So there's just this extraordinary sort of effect of there's birds and there's people all seemingly making their home on this very curious piece of coral. The fish are jumping up in amazement and enthusiasm, and there's stars featured all throughout. So again, a very unique kind of approach to Christmas, which seemingly goes very well with Dali and very few other artists. Which brings us to the 1967 cards. So Psychedelia is about to arrive. And this one's really quite lovely. This is the rose and butterflies in the snow, also just simply known as butterflies. And Dali's description, in the presence of the melancholic winter angel, the rose of passion blooms, and it leaves metamorphose to protect the butterfly in the Christmas psyche. So it's this beautiful sort of rose stem, just very singular, with the beautiful butterfly wings coming out of it. You have the melancholic angel over here, and then another religious figure approaching from the other side. But it's very simple and goes back to those early 1950s designs. The next year is pretty over the top and in a very different direction, just called Heart from 1968. And in the description, Dali says, the roots of the Christmas tree rise from the stars whilst the pointed end is transplanted into the heart of the earth itself. And if you can see down here, there's a medical figure holding the caduceus, and the detail has to do with the idea of the transplant of the heart. So Christmas and surgery and heart transplants all go together for Dali in this particular one. Which brings us to 1969 and the first landing on the moon. This one's called Moon Embryo. And Dali's description is the human footprint fertilizing the entrails of Selene give rise to her vivified stone lap, the roots of the Christmas tree. So here you have the roots of the Christmas tree coming out of Selene's, the moon's center, which is brought about by Selene, her entrails. So again, a very unique take on Christmas tree card. The next year, totally beautiful, going back to something very lovely. This is Sugar Bells from 1970, maybe inspired by Disney movies or memories of Disney movies. Dali says the sugar bells, faced with the forces of evil, peal out the litany of flower power of the Christmas campanulus, or the bellflower itself. So the angel bells have become transformed into sound as well as vision in Dali's creation. 1971 brings us The Mermaid on the Beach. And Dali simply says that a sugar cherry savored under the evergreen Christmas tree gives rise to June, the paranoid plenitude of the joyful beaches of memory. So a lot of nostalgia starting to kick in at this point. The next one almost goes off the rails. This is Printed Circuits, or The Mystic Lamb of 1972, and it might be the last one. No, there's still another. The flame of ideals that shines from the printed circuits will soon transform the chaotic tree of original sin into the upright tree of Christmas perfections, or putrefactions. Very, very curious. Really not sure what inspired this one, but it looks very much like a 1970s Dali. Golden Angel, or Angel of Christmas from 1973. The golden Raphaelesque angel is the bearer of the Christmas tree, illustrious symbol of the Gloria in Excelsis Deo. So again, going back to those early angels that he had done in the 1940s and 50s. And then we have this lovely one called the Star Butterfly from 1974. This one's really quite nice. And Dali says, the unanimity between angelic and earthly beings intercourses and gestates in the branches of the Christmas trees under the aegis of the Star Butterfly. And it's a just beautiful design and much more traditional than some of the others. Unlike this one, which is something very different. It's the Tree Petals, or Visage, of 1975. And Dali simply says, the angel of men's goodwill on earth. So the tree becomes the face of the angel with these two petals transformed into eyes and lips. And then we have the Conch of 1976, which I think is the last of the series. And Dali says, from snail, magical toy, rises the angel that caresses the Christmas tree of childhood dreams. So very, very simple design, certainly not with the kind of delineation that you've seen prior to this, but this ended the sequence. So over 2 decades, Dali worked with this company creating these great Christmas cards. And as the company moved forward, it started to also do calendars for each year, celebrating Dali's designs. They really were very fortunate to have such a long relationship with Dali. And that continued as the company changed into the Sanofi Aventus. So these are also calendar cards using the same designs. And the story really comes forward in 2006 when the company actually put together an exhibition of all of Dali's original artwork called Christmas by Salvador Dali. It should be 1958 to 1976. It was held in both Barcelona and Madrid via the company, Sanofi Aventus. What's really interesting, though, is not just that they did this exhibition, which also featured, I don't know if you noticed, the upside-down Christmas tree hanging from the sky, but these designs became really beloved by a lot of people, leading the town of Figueres to actually create these designs in light decorations. So they used these designs as lights throughout the city during the time of Christmas. I don't know if it's still happening, but it's certainly a wonderful way to celebrate the holidays, with Dali celebrating the holidays over these 2 decades. And so now, just to close out my talk, I wanted to just share with you 2 rather unique Catalan traditions that are associated with the holidays. And some of you may be very familiar with these, but if you're not, they are truly quite unique. The very first is the Cagatio. This is also known as the Christmas log, and it's the Cagatio or Tio de Nadal. And it's a very curious design. It's just a log with 2 front legs. Has a little Catalan barretina, the red hat that's associated with Catalonia, and then a really fun little face on the front of it. Some of them are quite sweet looking, as this next one is. The Cagatio actually translates as the poop log, and that's a very important way to think about it. It's a small log with a friendly face, the red Catalan barretina, as I mentioned, and it's placed under a red blanket under the Christmas tree. He can either be made at home or he can be purchased. But many, many families throughout Catalonia will have one of these in their home during the Christmas season. He makes his appearance on December 8th, and he stays until Christmas Eve. So it's very much a part of your Christmas celebration if you're in Catalonia. Here you can see in the marketplace, this is how they'd be displayed. So they're very popular. People love to purchase them. A lot of small open markets in the Catalan region will have these out, and people will buy them up. They're very cute, very, very fun. And the tradition is that children will leave food out for them over the 16 days that they stay under the tree. So they leave a little bit of fruit, a little bit of some nuts, just something light for the Cagatio to snack on. And then come Christmas Eve, the children sing a song as they hit it with sticks, enticing him to poop out the presents which they have been preparing to share. And I just find this so horrifying, this particular little drawing. He's crying, he's being hurt so bad by these children, but you can see the joyous burst of toys and sweets that are coming out of him as a result of it. And here's one of the songs that I found online. This is the interpretation. It's essentially the children would sing in unison, poop log, poop nougat, hazelnuts, and matto cheese. Do not poop only salty herrings, for they are too salty. If you don't poop right, I'll hit you with a stick, poop log. And they sing this over and over as they dance around, and they all have sticks, and they all just smash their sticks, their logs. And essentially, then they go away from the room, and parents bring out small gifts of nougat and sweets that they place behind the log, and essentially the poop log has once again fulfilled its promise and shared wonderful sweets with people. So that is the Cagatio. It's something you may want to look up on your own. I believe there's a lot of information out there about them. Clearly, it has struck a certain chord with people unfamiliar with it. And speaking of unfamiliar with curious traditions, probably many more of you are familiar with this, but if you're not, there is another tradition that has a much more ancient origin, and that's called the Kangade. And the Kangade is part of every Catalan family's way of celebrating. And this is the Kangade, also referred to as the Holy Pooper. It is a gentleman, and you can see once again that wonderful, the red barretina associated with Catalans. And he is, basically giving back to the earth what he had taken in. So he is the holy pooper. There are a lot of different approaches for how to design them, but they're traditional figurines from Catalonia, and they wear the traditional baratina, and they are always squatting bare-bottomed over a pile of poop. And here's a kind of Santa-esque figure. They are always used in the nativity scene. They are very specific. They are not simply a decorative feature. They are part of your nativity manger scene. And it's hidden in the nativity scene, and it's to be found in almost every Catalan house. So, for example, here's a photo. You can see where he's placed in. He is thought to bring wealth and prosperity. And I think it's the idea that you are giving back to the earth what was taken from the earth. It's a way of giving thanks, and it also has to do with a much more earthy-based culture that is the Catalan culture. And here we have a whole series of them that are being made. These are depositing golden gifts. You can also find them. There are celebrities, there are political leaders, even Dali and his wife Gala have been turned into Kangades. There's a big industry for these coming out of Catalonia, but it is definitely an old tradition that goes back probably to the Middle Ages. But my favorite one of all is the large Kangade that was found at the Mary Magnum Mall in Barcelona. So truly it is part of the Catalan way of celebrating the holidays, and if nothing else, this certainly underlines that idea. So hopefully today you've been entertained. You've maybe found a new couple details about Dali and the way Catalans celebrate the holidays. With that, happy holidays to everybody. Feliz Navidad. Thank you all for coming. And maybe this will be the time to bring some of these traditions into your own household. I don't know. Are there any questions before we wrap it up? Okay. Oh, yes.
So when for me, when I see Dali art, I always am confronted with a conundrum. Do you think his art is intended or was intended to be revelatory or unfathomable?
So the question was, Dali's art, is it intended to be revelatory or unfathomable? Was he trying to deliberately confuse us, or is he trying to create a new vision for us? And I think, depending on the particular image, I think you could choose either of those as an interpretation. I think Dali did want to blow people's minds, confound and try to make things seem more important sometimes than they were. But other times he truly had visions that he wanted to share that are unique and extraordinary, like Nature More Vivant would be a good example of that, where I don't think he's trying to confuse, but rather illustrate a very specific type of idea that seems very unusual. And so I think both of those are actually correct ways to describe Dali, depending on what the images you're looking at. Yes, sir.
You put up all these crazy off-the-wall quotations today. Were these solicited by the sponsors, or were they unsolicited Dali music?
So the question is about the descriptions that I shared with each one of these cards for the Spanish company. Were they solicited by the company, or did Dali just feel that they were essential as a part of it? And I'm not sure. I don't know the specific history of how the contract started or how it worked, but they seem to have really inspired Dali to have a lot of fun. So I don't know if it was part of the original contract, but certainly it seemed like Dali took it on as not a casual, oh, here's a tree with butterflies, but rather he goes out of his way to find the most curious description he could possibly have. And I think that's kind of part of his narrative style, that Dali just thinks in these kind of extraordinary storytelling ways where if one word has 2 syllables, it's much better if it has 20 syllables. It's like the more, the better for Dali. And so it seems to be very much a part of the way he approached art in general. So I don't know if it was originally in the contract, but it certainly feels like something he embraced and had fun with. Yes, sir.
Did Gala have, what was Gala's impact, particularly in describing Dali's work? Because, he has an unbelievable vocabulary, as you can see. And I just wonder what role she played in any of that.
So the question is about Dali's wife, Gala, and the role that she played in his artwork. In general, she becomes his best critic and business partner, and the person who initially gets the word out about what Dali could do, how he was accomplished, finding the right sort of people for him to be working with. But at a certain point, she is less that and more just, I guess, enjoying the success that she had enabled Dali to have. So by the time these cards are being done, I'm not sure how much interest she has in any of what he's creating on this level. I think with commercial projects, she may have had something to do with it, but probably not. By this time, Dali had a secretary who was working for him. And I think that, she just is sort of basking in the aura of Dali without really having a lot to do with his ideas. So I don't think that she's a big part of being critical of him at this point. But it's a very good question. And follow up?
If I can do a follow-up.
Uh-huh.
Speculate, what was the it, that was Gala to Dali? Like, why Gala? Anybody on the planet that he might have associated with, she must have been an amazing person.
Yes, that is true. So the question is just, what is it about Gala? How does Gala fit in with Dali? And I think that when Dali encountered her, she was celebrated as one of the most important females in the world of surrealism. She was the most important one. She was the muse to many of the greatest of the surrealists, and she had relationships with many of the surrealists. And so it was a point of probably pride and conquest. For her, Dali represented somebody who had great talent, great vision, and needed to have a kind of mother figure to shape him into something even greater. But as they went on in time, the relationship became more complicated and more layered, and certainly that's a different talk. But I think that for Dali, she was essential. I don't think we'd be talking about Dali today had Gala not come along and kind of crafted him into the artist that we know. So any other questions? Yes.
I have one. The picture at the latest stages when it was the reference to evil, was that a mushroom cloud in red up in the corner on that photo?
Let's see. Going back, I'm trying to think of one that had an eagle. It would be one of these. So it was one of these late.
I think you go back further.
That one.
That looks like a mushroom cloud, and it's talking about evil and the
It
forces of evil.
is a very good reference, and I think you are correct. Dali certainly was very hyper aware of the atomic bomb. Led to his entire development as a nuclear mystical artist in the 50s. And so he was very conscious of the atom. And I think that you're right. I think that is a reference to the idea of forces of evil and the opportunity for the bomb to be in the hands of somebody who may not hesitate to press the trigger. So yeah, I think that's exactly what this is. And it's very chilling and certainly part of Dali's imagination, even in 1970. Yeah, exactly. The bells will take care of all evil, hopefully. Because I guess 1970, things were getting pretty bad in the world. Yes?
In reference to the two traditions, the big poem,
Mm-hmm.
how long was that tradition in place before Dali?
Well, the Kangade was probably several centuries, going back to maybe even the 1600s or 1500s. So it's always been kind of part of the peasant culture, which was very much a rural agricultural kind of culture. And so it was always just part of it. You can even find references to the Kangade, say, in the paintings of Juan Miró, Dali's colleague from Catalonia. So it's certainly something that is much bigger than Dali. I don't know how far back the Cagatillo goes, but I have a feeling it's similar, that it's independent of Dali. And actually, there's no reference to the Cagatillo in Dali's work. There's references to the Kangade, but the log is not really part of any of the images that he creates. So these are definitely Catalan traditions that he would have been aware of and brought up within, and would have influenced some of his ideas, as some of his art goes pretty far in those directions. Mm-hmm. Other questions? Yes.
One on the last picture in the presentation, the last card, there's a mother and child again. Did he return to the mother and child being in the foreground?
So the question is about the two figures on the very bottom right-hand side. I think this is actually a father and child. 99% of the time when Dali has a kind of figure of a child with an adult, it's almost always the father figure. as it started in the 1930s and he repeated it over and over again. The mother and child was actually a surprise because he rarely painted the female as being the one who's introducing him to the world. So that seemed to be pretty unique to that card. The other thing is this figure seems to be wearing one of the male baratinas, the red hat, which is why I think it's probably a father figure. But I think they have the same idea. Dali's nostalgic for childhood, and this figure is introducing him as a child to this kind of vision or this idea. So I think it all goes back to nostalgia and the idea of the parents as being the ones who bring this world, make the world available to him to see it this way. But yeah, whether it's the father or the mother, it's the same sort of sensibility that was in that first card. So with that, if there's no more questions, happy holidays, everyone. Thanks for coming out.